In August 1619, a ship arrived in Point Comfort, Virginia, carrying more than 20 enslaved Africans, the first on record to be brought to the English colony of Virginia. They were among the 12.5 million Africans forced into the transatlantic slave trade, their journey to the New World, today known as the Middle Passage. A poem by Clint Roy Smith. Over the course of 350 years, 36,000 slave ships crossed the Atlantic Ocean. I walk over to the globe and move my finger back and forth between the fragile continents. I try to keep track of how many times I drag my hand across the bristled hemispheres, but grow weary of chasing a history that swallowed me. For every 100 people who were captured and enslaved, 40 died before they ever reached the New World. I pull my index finger from Angola to Brazil and feel the bodies jumping from the ship. I drag my thumb from Ghana to Jamaica and feel the weight of dysentery make an anvil of my touch. I slide my ring finger from Senegal to South Carolina and feel the ocean separate 1 million families. The soft hum of history spins on its tilted axis. A cavalcade of ghost ships wash their hands of all they carried.
Come, whoever you are. Come, whoever you are. You've broken your vows 1,000 times. worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no care of her love despairs. Come yet again, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no care of the love despair. Come, whoever you are, leaving. Ours is no come, yet again come.
Good morning. That was beautiful. I am the Reverend Misha Sanders, Senior Minister here at Northwest Unitarian Universalist Congregation in beautiful, sunny, and warm Sandy Springs, Georgia. Northwest Unitarian Universalist Congregation seeks to create loving community, inspire joy and spiritual growth, and support courageous action. All are welcome, as together we journey towards justice and equity by learning and caring and acting together. We especially welcome any newcomers and guests that we have today. I hope that you will stick around and join us for coffee hour after worship, right from the comfort of your own homes. You can just stay right where you are when this service ends. There's no need to leave this Zoom call. The coffee hour will begin as soon as the postlude is over. Speaking of guests, y'all, this is an exciting Sunday. Although we here at NWUUC are hosting the gathering, we represent just one of three congregations who are joining together today in grateful and joyous collaboration. It is my honor to welcome the ministry teams and the congregations from the Universalist Unitarian Church of East Liberty of Clarklake, Michigan, under the ministry of Reverend Dan Miyake. Dan, can you wave and maybe say something so that you get a little bit of screen time? Say hello to the folks.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be
There
here.
he is. Thank you, Dan. I've lost my place. There we go. That is the Reverend Dan with Worship Associate and Justice Ministry Coordinator Ann Green. Thank you so much for Ann. We just heard from her welcoming us to worship. Thank you, Reverend Dan and Ann and the UUCEL congregation for joining us. And also, not a new name to us here at Northwest, the Reverend Christina Branham Martin has joined us, along with the congregation that she serves, the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Clemson, South Carolina. Welcome, Clemson UUs. And Reverend Christina, we are honored to share this space and this worship with you all, dear faith family. And now, if you haven't already, it's a great time to grab whatever materials you'll need to light your own chalice, if you'd like that to be a part of your worship experience this morning. As always, kindly set your phones to worship mode. We won't know, but we think you might enjoy an hour free from distractions. And do feel free to check in to your social media of choice and let your friends and family know about this place of caring that you have found today. We say this part every week here at Northwest, and I know that it is true in Clarklake and in Clemson too, that our congregations are exciting places to be, and we do love it when you share the good news. I am so thankful for the power of technology that has given us this gift of worshiping together. Although we cannot physically be together to greet each other today with hugs, high fives, smiles, and words of love, we are all here together in spirit, and each and every one of us is welcome.
Hello, my name is Elissa, I'm Mia, and this is Apollo.
And today we're going to light the chalice.
Hello and good morning. It is so good to be with you, to be with people that I know from years past and people that I'm meeting just today. I start with an introduction to our topic today, and then Adia will follow next with the story. Author William Faulkner penned that the past is never past. And this is true this week as we honor the life and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., and as we learn about the 1619 Project and ask larger questions about what critical race theory is. King wrote that education must enable one to sift and weigh evidence, to discern the true from the false, the real from the unreal, and the facts from the fiction. And today we seek to educate ourselves about historical truth. Historical truth, what is that? Historical truth can be found in asking these questions. Who decides what stories define the past? Whose stories are being told and whose are being left out? The past and our interpretation of it. Historical truth becomes something we are always updating and fighting over. And fighting over is what we are doing right now in a battle all across this country. So what is most crucial for us to ask is who decides what stories we teach our children and who gets the final word on truth? This book, a collection of essays called the 1619 Project, was created by journalist Nicole Hannah-Jones. And it contends that the date 1619 should be at the center of our national history. It says that the only way to fully appreciate the vast complexity of American history is to identity is to understand that the legacy of slavery and racism experienced by Black Americans and the powerful role Black Americans have played in the development of our democracy. And this companion book, the children's book to the 1619 Project, Adia will share in just a moment in 3 parts in our service. And these 2 books stand on the tenets of critical race theory. What is critical race theory? This is important for us to know because 30 state legislatures are now considering or have passed bans on something called critical race theory being taught in our schools. One simple definition of critical race theory is that racism is not a bygone relic of the past. Instead, it acknowledges that the legacy of slavery and segregation and the imposition of second-class citizenship on Black Americans and other people of color continues to permeate the social fabric of this nation. Like Faulkner said, the past is never past. Why is CRT, critical race theory, so scary? I think because it requires people to think critically of themselves, their country, and about the systems that keep people of color out, and one's own complicity with those systems. It asks everyone to understand how you might have benefited from those systems, from structures like redlining and gentrification and housing, like advantages in education and generational wealth. This is looking historical truth in the eye. One of our colleagues, Reverend Monica Dobbins, says that this may all seem like preaching to the choir today. Yet to fear critical race theory is not just for the scary fringe groups or conservatives in red states. This fear of the new algorithm of racial justice crosses political and ideological lines. There's even a movement in the Unitarian Universalist Association right now to undermine the racial justice work of our congregations in the name of freedom of expression, making some of the very same claims that we're hearing in the news, that critical race theory is racist, and that it encourages racial segregation, and that it hampers the freedom of speech and democracy. Some of these folks have been involved in racial justice efforts since the civil rights movement. And while their hearts might be in the right place, it is unfortunately human nature to respond with defensiveness when faced with criticism about ourselves or things that we think define our identities. So Dobbins challenges us. She says, go beyond the 101 level anti-racism that we learned from our ancestors in the 60s and the 70s. We need to get past being colorblind and judging people on the content of their character alone. We need to expect racism to show up, not wearing polo shirts and carrying tiki torches, but as nice people who don't have a racist bone in their bodies, but just care about their kids and love their country. We need to expect racism to show up and not be surprised by it. It is difficult to explain to our children and to ourselves that the institution of slavery is part of our history of a nation, and that things such as the Tulsa Race Massacre or the Trail of Tears or the Japanese internment occurred in this land. Yes, it is difficult to have these conversations also about the deaths of George Floyd or Breonna Taylor. But no matter how hard it is for white adults to explain it to their kids, it cannot compare with the difficulty adults of color face when explaining it to theirs. If children of color are old enough to experience racism, then white kids of the same age are old enough to learn how to stop it. So in conclusion, today, as we look at the tenets of critical race theory, it is important for us to stand up that this teaching not be banned in our schools. And as we remember King's words today, education must enable one to sift and weigh evidence, to discern the true from the false, the real from the unreal, the facts from the fiction. Our children and all of us need this kind of education so they can create new paradigms that this country can live into. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Christina. Again, my name is Adia Fields Idofia, and I am the Director of Religious Education for Children and Youth here at Northwest. As Reverend Christina mentioned, our story today is entitled The 1619 Project, Born on the Water by Nicole Hannah-Jones and Renee Watson. The little girl in this story is a younger version of me. I distinctly remember one day as an 8th grader, we were discussing Georgia history, and my teacher made the statement that slave owners did not mistreat the people who were enslaved. At that moment, I immediately felt a tug of war inside of me. I was aware of the oral history that my family had shared with me and the harsh realities of what took place during slavery. Someone who was educated, far older than me, and had a degree, someone who was supposed to have the expertise to teach this topic, was saying something completely different from what I knew to be true. Our story today is directly related to the social justice work that we are all committed to conquering together. Now I'd like to share my screen, and I will be sharing this story in 3 parts throughout our service today. I'd like to start with a quote. Not everything at its face can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. James Baldwin. My teacher gives us an assignment. Who are you? She asks. Trace your roots, draw a flag that represents your ancestral land. Most of my classmates can count back many generations and learn about the countries where their families came from. They draw their flags, but I leave my paper blank. I do not know where I begin, what my story is. At home, Grandma asks, how was school? I tell her about the assignment, how I couldn't finish it, how I can only count back 3 generations here in this country, where my parents, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents were born. But before that, I don't know. I tell her that I am ashamed. Grandma gathers the whole family and says, come, let me tell you our beginning. Let me tell you where we're from. They say our people were born on the water, but our people had a home, a place, a land before they were sold. 400 years ago in 1619, our ancestors were taken and brought here on a ship called the White Lion, a whole year before the Mayflower arrived. But before that dreadful voyage, there was a time when they did not pray for freedom. There was a time when they did not sing about overcoming. Their story does not begin with whips and chains. They had a home, a place, a land, a beginning. Their story is our story. Before they were enslaved, they were free. The kingdom of Undongo was nestled between the Lukala and the Kwaza rivers on a high plateau in West Central Africa. The people were good with their hands, knew the power of a seed, how to plant it, water it, how to make something out of nothing. The people were good with their minds, good at math and science. They used shells for money, counting, recording, trading. They knew what their work was worth. Their hands had a knowing. They knew how to hold a baby close, how to rock the child to sleep, to keep her from crying. Their hands knew how to mix herbs, how to get just the right flavor for a meal. Their hands knew how to beat and twist and shape iron, how to make gardening tools, armor, and weapons.
Thank you, Miss Adia. And thank you so much for opening us up by sharing your own experience. That is really, really helpful. And I appreciate it. From a Tuesday morning news article this Tuesday, in the New York Amsterdam News, a media source whose subheading reads, A New Black View. Senior news correspondent Stacey M. Brown writes this: prayer breakfasts, marches, parades, and an uptick in volunteer efforts to support the annual day of service have remained staples of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. But the late civil rights icon family has asked that observers strike a different tune in 2022. King's family has requested no celebrations unless federal lawmakers pass voting rights legislation, unless and until they pass voting rights legislation. Quote, President Biden and Congress used their political muscle to deliver a vital infrastructure deal, and now we are calling on them to do the same to restore the very voting rights protections my father and countless other civil rights leaders bled to secure, Martin Luther King III said in a statement. We will not accept empty promises in pursuit of my father's dream for a more equal and just America, said King III. As I recently learned, they affectionately call him, the oldest son and oldest living child of King Jr. and Coretta Scott King. King III insisted that President Biden and members of Congress use that same energy and force that they mustered in 2021 to pass the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. You delivered for bridges, now deliver for voting rights, King III asserted. We wish to restore and expand voting rights to honor Dr. King's legacy, the family wrote in a statement. The Senate must pass the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and ensure that the Jim Crow filibuster doesn't stand in the way, the King family stated. Friends, I have absolutely nothing more important to say than what Dr. King's family already said this week. And my Georgia beloveds, I know that we already know both the high stakes and the glorious change possible when every citizen is allowed, encouraged, and empowered to vote. For our Northwest Unitarian Universalist congregation family, let me just affirm that our congregation will be delving deeply into the book, the 1619 Project, and also this lovely companion children's book around which we have centered today's worship. No concrete plans to share with you today because we await, with the rest of the world, the letting up of this virus that is keeping us too cautious to convene. But rest assured, the planning for this book discussion and the actions we will take together to practice what we preach, those will be one of two main focuses of our next church year, and possibly sooner as the state of our safety changes for the better, we hope and pray. Along with our ministry team, our own David Stewart and Dr. Vita Tucker will be co-leaders of this endeavor. So I know that you join me in complete assurance that these sessions will be worth making time for. I cannot wait to learn and grow with you all, especially around this important cause of dismantling the white supremacy culture within and beyond our walls. In Luke chapter 12, verse 48 in the Christian Bible, the holy text of Dr. King and the family that carries his legacy among us, Jesus said, "For unto whom much is given, much shall be required, and to whom has been committed much, of them they will ask more." Friends who share my whiteness, we have been given an entire societal structure in which we are the primary beneficiaries. Learning about our shared history with our beloved family members who do not share in white privilege. Well, in the light of Jesus's words and the loving, inclusive words of the generations of Reverend Kings, it seems like it's the very least we can do to take a look at our history. So come on, join us in the work, y'all. It is way past time, but a responsibility. And what an amazing, amazing time to be alive. Now please join Northwest's beloved Sally Mitchell as she plays the Black National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing.
We will now continue with an excerpt from the book, The 1619 Project, Born on the Water. The White Lion. No one knows how long it took before they knew they would never see Undongo again, never run along the high, high plateau or throw their heads back in giggles with their best friends. Maybe it was the second month or third when they had not seen their land or any land. For so many days, they could no longer count. Packed in dark misery, strangers chained together, head to feet, hip to hip, in the bottom of a ship called the White Lion. They saw these strangers, men, women, children, kidnapped too, from many villages. These were their people now. These many people became one people, a new people, and that is why the people say, we were born on the water, we come from the people who refused to die. Some could not bear the pain. They refused to eat. They shut their mouths until their hearts gave out. Others tossed themselves into the teal eternity of the Atlantic Ocean, swimming one last time with the ancestors. Sickness and hunger, filth and cruelty took the others, almost half. But those who did not die resolved to live, no matter what. Finally, the ship stopped moving and the people were dragged to the deck. They closed their eyes against the light of a sun they had not seen since Mother Africa's coast. They closed their eyes against the sight of a land that was not theirs. They cried a silent cry as white men spoke strange words, talking about their bodies, and with a handshake, traded another's child, another's mama and daddy. After a long day's work, planting tobacco in the fields, after brutal treatment, after nothing to show for their hard work, sadness would come, a longing for Undongo, for the mamas, for the daddies, for their friends they could no longer hug and talk with under the warm sun. From sunup to sundown, the people worked the fields, growing and harvesting tobacco. The crops were sold to Europe, bringing wealth to Virginia. But the enslaved people did not get anything in return for their labor. The people worked and worked. When the people grew weary, they remembered their yesterdays, remembered their songs from Undongo, sang them to ease their spirits. As they sang, they looked into the future, hoped for better days, planted prayers into the heavens, praying, praying, praying for freedom. In 1624, Anthony and Isabella, enslaved on the plantation of Captain William Tucker and his wife, Mary Tucker, two ordinary people forced to till the soil, forced to build a country they were not from, found a way to build a love for each other and create a family, a legacy. They did not know their family would be the start of a new people. They were just two ordinary people who had a son, a new beginning, a promise to live on and on. Hope is a promise, faith that a better day will come, belief that things will not always be this way. Hope is a refusal to give up, to die out. Hope is a child born. Way back then, hope had a name, William Tucker. He was born to ordinary people, a man and a woman who were not free, but who believed in freedom, who were not free, but believed that one day freedom would come, even if they never saw it. These two ordinary people gave life to an extraordinary child, a child not of African, a child not of Europe, nor of the native people already here, but a child of the new people formed on the water. The first Black child born in the land that would become the United States, the first truly American child. And now Anne Green and Reverend Dan will share a reflection.
I am Anne Green, from the Universalist Unitarian Church of East Liberty in Clarklake, Michigan, just south of Jackson. Our congregation currently has 74 members, all white, and the majority of us are over 60. We are in a rural South Central Michigan area that leans heavily to the right, very heavily. We pride ourselves as a beacon for liberal religion and social justice in our area for 165 years. In September of 2020, with the guidance of our minister, Reverend Dan Miyake, our Social Justice Committee began meeting with a robust group of 18 people. The committee has been actively engaged in a variety of social justice activities, but our focus has been on anti-racism work. Alongside the Social Justice Committee, our anti-racism book study group has met regularly for some months and discussed books such as Breathe, A Letter to My Sons, How to Be an Anti-Racist, White Fragility, and Caste. The current book is Pleasure Activism. There we learned a valuable lesson that has enabled us to take concrete, actionable steps toward our anti-racism goals. We learned to ask the question, so what? So what if we read a book? How is that going to change anything? While education is great, we can't stop there and pat ourselves on the back for being good UUs. This work requires us to do more, not just talk about it. The Social Justice Committee moved into action, learning about the history of race in America, systemic racism, and addressing racism on local, state, and national levels. We joined community and statewide organizations, attended local presentations and webinars, and met with community leaders to learn about activities and plans. 2 members have been observing and reporting on the county committee addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion in local government. When we asked a prominent African-American community leader, now Jackson's mayor, Dan Mahoney, how we could help combat racism in Jackson, he said that white people needed to address that issue among themselves. In response, we created a 6-part series we called Owning White Privilege. The sessions focus on the history of whiteness, addressing personal racism, responding to racism in local government and local organizations, and finally, creating action plans. Members also created a toolkit with resources from YouTube, Instagram, podcasts, websites, and a list of books and movies, music, and poems. We presented Owning White Privilege to a group of congregants as a kind of a test run. I have lost my place. I'm sorry. Before offering it to the larger congregation and then to the community. The Jackson District Library is offering to partner with us to provide venues and publicity. The series brought about various interesting, unexpected results. One was the forming of an affinity group where people identified a common interest. They've been journaling about implicit biases, reading resources, and emailing each other to share their discoveries with the intent to make a presentation. Another result was that the chair of a predominantly white university honors program is sending a letter to all admission counselors stressing that the program is accessible, welcoming, and a safe place. But wait, there's more. Several members are contacting local leaders to gather and share information about upcoming summits and projects that we can promote and perhaps participate in. Yet another person, after reading the new Jim Crow and the Black UU Survival Guide, realized we needed to let people know who we are, what we stand for, and how to find us. She placed advertising for the church in 2 local newspapers, one of which is a longtime paper in the Black community. Another person purchased a Black Lives Matter flag to fly along with our pride flag in front of the church. We don't keep secrets. The committee reports its activities to the congregation in the monthly newsletter called the Bell Note and in the weekly email update called the Chimes, and there's always more to do. We are a small church, but to paraphrase Shakespeare, Though we be little, yet we be fierce. Thank you.
Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I'm tired. I'm weak. I'm worn through the storm, through the night. Lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me home. Lord, lead me home.
We will now continue with part 3 by showing an excerpt from the 1619 project, Born on the Water. Resist. Life was hard, and it would get harder for the generations to come. White people told the people they were not human, that the people were things to be bought and sold and given as gifts, alongside horses and chairs. When the people were beaten, they said that the people did not feel anything, that when they sold people's children, they said the people didn't love. These were lies they made up so they could feel okay about slavery. It was wrong, always and forever, to own human beings. It is wrong, always and forever, to treat human beings like things. The people fought back. For 250 years, the people resisted every day in ways big and small. For 250 years, the biggest resistance of all was that the people kept living. And the people who were born on the water survived, kept living and living. It was illegal to teach enslaved people how to read, but they birthed generations of teachers and librarians, scholars and authors. They were brokenhearted, beaten and bruised, but they became healers, pastors and activists, doctors and counselors. No one could steal the people's joy. They wrote songs, created jazz and hip hop, rhythm and blues. They became inventors and athletes, nurses and cooks, pilots and architects, farmers and housekeepers, singers and artists, dancers and poets, mathematicians and scientists. They passed on their stories through the stitch of a quilt, shared secret messages through songs. The people survived, the people fought. And because the people survived and because the people fought, they finally got freedom. And because the people survived and because the people fought, America has equality in the law. And because the people survived and because the people fought, America began to live up to its promise of democracy. It is the people who fight for this democracy still. Grandma looks at me and my brother and tells us, this is why we say Black Lives Matter and why we celebrate Black Girl Magic, why we believe we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. Never forget we are their hope. Never forget you come from a people of great strength, Grandma says. Be proud of our story, your story. The next day I go to school, pull out my red crayon, my blue and my white. I draw the stars and I draw the stripes of the flag of the country that my ancestors built, that my grandma and grandpa built, that I will help build too. And I am not ashamed. I know what my story is, where I come from, where I begin. Thank you for sharing the story and joining with this important part of our history. And now Reverend Christina will lead us in prayer and meditation.
Thank you so much, Adia, for that beautiful telling of the story and for sharing your own story and experience. It is so important to hear. Please join me now in the spirit of prayer and meditation and reflection. This prayer comes from the words of Kathleen Rowlands with some adaptation. Spirit of justice, who befriends those who stand upon the constant edge of decision, crucial and alone, we are grateful for being together this morning. Let me first begin with what captivated us last night. We hold in our hearts those who were held hostage last night at the synagogue in Texas. Those hostages are now out safely, and we hold them, and may their road to healing from trauma and anti-Semitism begin. Also, we gather especially today and remember Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but not only him, for there were thousands of unnamed people who put their bodies and lives on the line so that all may be free. And yet, as we have learned today in so many important ways, this freedom comes at a cost. And we know that racism and homophobia, ageism and ableism, sexism and classism, all of these unacknowledged realities prevent us from fully knowing one another, from creating the beloved community spoken of by prophets and ordinary persons alike. Our prayer today is that the work of Dr. King continue to eradicate injustice wherever and whenever we encounter it. And may we continue to speak out against injustice, to speak even if we are afraid our words will not be heard or welcomed. May the spirit of this work continue to flow through our daily living. May we have the courage of Dr. King as we continue to stand up for justice, for reconciliation, and for truth, despite challenge and controversy. Dr. King went to the mountaintop and he saw the promised land, and he reassured us that we will get there one day. May that be no paradisal dream, but a reality in our own time. May it be so. Amen.
There is always a light when we are ready to see it. There is always a light when we are ready to be it, to see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night, to climb this hill. Together we will. There is always your light in the dark. We are ready to see it. There is always your light in the dark. We are ready to be it. To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night and be a gift. Together we will. There is always your light. There is always the dark. We are ready to see it. There is always your light. There is always the dark. We are ready to be it. To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night and be a gift. Together we will. There is always light. There is always dark. There is always shine your light. There is always dark. To see the light, to be the light, to shine your eyes in the dark of night and be a climb this hill. Together we will. There is always shine your light. There is always dark. There is always shine your light. There is always dark. Be the light.
We give to remind ourselves of how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give with the faith that together we have enough. We give to say yes to something we value. With our gifts freely given, may we say yes to the value of our faith. Today's joint congregation offering will go entirely to support the work of Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism. The LUU seeks to expand the power and capacity of Black Unitarian Universalists within our faith, providing support, information, and resources for Black Unitarian Universalists, and doing justice making and liberation through our faith. On the slide is the link to use to give directly to the LUU. Our usher or producer is also putting this link in the chat box right now. Please give generously to this worthy cause. If you choose to give via text or check to your own congregation, please use your usual protocol while making sure to specify the LUU offering in the memo line or in the drop-down option in your online portal. And do reach out to your congregation's financial leaders for any further clarification. Our offering will now be joyously given and gratefully received.
Friends, I just want to jump in before Cameron begins sharing their screen again with our benediction and our postlude. Please do stick around so that we can talk to one another and get to know each other when this service has completed. Thank you, Anne, for offering our offering, and thank you all for offering your gifts in return to BLUU.
Go your ways, knowing not the answers to all things, yet seeking always the answer to one more thing than you know. 1, 2, 3.